Her name was Helen. She married Robert in June of 1951 at a Methodist church in Dayton, Ohio. They were together for 41 years until he died in 1992. Her daughter said that her father looked at her mother the same way in 1987 that he had in the wedding photographs. Helen had never read a self-help book. She followed 13 habits absorbed from her mother, from Ladies' Home Journal, from the women on her street who had been married longer than she had been alive. 13 buried secrets, everyone free, everyone quietly gone, the moment there was more money in telling women to fix their husbands than in teaching them to cultivate themselves. Number 12 is what Revlon built an entire campaign around in 1952, and the women who came before already knew it. Number 1 is why Robert's eyes hadn't changed in 40 years. Let's get into it. Number 13, the 15-minute ritual before he came home. At 4:45 every afternoon, Helen stopped whatever she was doing. The children were told, quiet time. She went to the bathroom mirror, reapplied her Pond's face powder, and changed into the house dress she kept for evenings, a cotton shirtwaist in a blue print, not the one she had been cleaning in all day. She touched her hair, decided she looked like a woman, and went back to the kitchen. She called it Freshening Up. The Good Wife's Guide, published in Housekeeping Monthly in May of 1955, formalized what Helen and every woman on her block already practiced. Take 15 minutes to rest so you'll be refreshed when he arrives. Touch up your makeup, put a ribbon in your hair, and be fresh looking. What she understood, without having the language for it, was that the woman who greeted him at the door was a different woman than the one who had been scrubbing the bathroom at 2 o'clock. The change of dress made that transition real. It was not pretending. It was arriving. Number 12, perfume on pulse points every morning, not just for going out. The bottle on Helen's vanity was White Shoulders by Evyan, a round white bottle with a gold cap, $3.50 at the Rexall drugstore on 5th Street. Launched in 1945 and everywhere by 1952. Floral, powdery, warm. She applied it to the inside of both wrists, behind each ear, and to the base of her throat every morning. Not before church, not before dinner out. Every morning between her coffee and her second cup. Women of her generation understood this without being told. Scent was not an accessory, it was an atmosphere. Women who wanted something bolder reached for Taboo by Dana, marketed since 1932 as the forbidden fragrance, or for Arpège by Lanvin in the black and gold sphere. Women who wanted something younger reached for Evening in Paris by Bourjois in the cobalt blue bottle, 49 cents at Woolworths. Every price point, every morning. Smell is the only sense with a direct line to the part of the brain where memory and emotion live. It bypasses everything rational and lands somewhere older. A perfume worn every morning in the same house for 40 years does not remain a perfume. It becomes the woman herself. Robert did not smell White Shoulders. He smelled Helen. The modern equivalent of this has been sold back to women in pheromone-infused serums at $60 a bottle. White Shoulders, $3.50. The mechanism was always the same. Number 11, red lipstick was not a choice. It was a commitment. In October of 1952, Revlon ran a full-page advertisement in Vogue. The model was Dorian Lee. The shade was Fire and Ice, a blue, red, cool, and vivid at once. The copy asked 20 questions. Are you made for fire and ice? Women tore the page out. Helen kept hers for 11 years. She wore Fire and Ice on evenings they went out. On ordinary mornings, she wore Love That Red, also Revlon, a warmer red. Not because the magazine told her to, because her mother had said while teaching her to set a table in 1944 that a woman without lipstick looks like she has stopped trying. In 2008, Andrew Elliott at the University of Rochester published research in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, confirming what every woman in Helen's neighborhood already knew. The color red measurably increases perceived attractiveness across every culture studied. Red draws the eye to the face. But Helen had not read the study. She applied it every morning before the children had breakfast. Not for Robert, for the woman in the mirror, before the day asked anything of her. She did not stop wearing lipstick after the wedding. That was the whole point. Number 10, she greeted him at the door every evening. For 41 years, 6 o'clock, Robert's Chevrolet in the driveway. Helen heard it from the kitchen. She came to the door. She smiled and she kissed him. She did not, as the Good Wife's Guide put it, greet him with complaints and problems. She asked how his day was. There was a glass of iced tea on the counter in summer, a cup of coffee in winter. The house smelled like whatever was in the oven. This sounds simple because it is. She did it every day for 41 years, not as a decision she made once and never revisited. John Gottman at the University of Washington spent 3 decades studying what separated marriages that lasted from those that did not. His finding was that the way couples reunite after even a single day apart is one of the strongest predictors of long-term satisfaction. Helen had been performing the reunion since 1951. She called it answering the door. The threshold mattered because the threshold was a boundary. His day ended there. Their evening began. She stood at it. That was not a small thing. Number 9, she cooked his favorite meal as an act of thinking about him. The Good Wife's Guide was specific. Plan ahead, even the night before, to have a delicious meal ready on time for his return. This is a way of letting him know that you have been thinking about him and are concerned about his needs. Helen made Robert's pot roast every other Sunday. Chuck, because Chuck at 33 cents a pound from the A&P, became something else entirely after 4 hours in a covered Dutch oven with a cup of beef stock and a bay leaf. She made his mother's recipe for apple pie with a lard crust, Cortland apples from the bin on 5th Street, and a pinch of nutmeg on a Tuesday in October, for no reason except that she had passed the apple display at the market and thought of him. What the science on shared meals confirms, she already knew. But the deeper mechanism has no name in any study. It is the knowledge sitting across from her at dinner that she had thought about him that afternoon, not because she was obligated to, but because she had passed the apples and he had entered her mind. The Tuesday pie is not in any cookbook. Number 8, she saved her frustrations for the women on her street. Helen had Dorothy next door. She had Frances from the Methodist Women's Auxiliary. She had her sister on the phone every Thursday morning while the children were at school. Whatever frustrated her, the money being tight in February, the argument from Tuesday that had not been resolved, the thing Robert said at dinner that she was still turning over 3 days later, went to Dorothy, Frances, or her sister. Not to Robert's dinner table. This was not suppression. She vented. She complained. She said exactly what she thought. She just did it through the correct channel. John Gottman's research identified the single strongest predictor of relationship failure, not how often a couple fought, but the ratio of negative to positive interactions. Fewer than 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative, and the marriage was statistically at risk. Helen maintained that ratio without knowing the mathematics behind it. She came to Robert calm because she had arrived at calm by another route first. Dorothy heard everything. Robert heard that she was glad he was home. Number 7, she never stopped dressing like the woman he had married. There's a photograph of Helen taken in 1968, 17 years after the wedding. She's in her kitchen, wearing a printed shirtwaist, a short string of pearls, and low-heeled shoes. Her hair is set, a dish towel over one arm. She looks exactly as she did on the first date Robert took her on in 1949. Not because she had not aged. She had never decided that being at home was a reason to stop. She wore her house dress in the early morning, before the children were up. She changed before noon. She never sat down to dinner in the clothes she had cleaned the bathroom in. She had absorbed one rule from her mother without its ever being stated. The woman he came home to should look like a woman worth coming home to. She did not dress for him exactly. She dressed for who she was. He was the beneficiary of that. There's a distinction there, and she held it for 41 years. Somewhere between 1955 and 1975, women's magazines shifted their focus. The same publications that had spent 20 years teaching women how to cultivate themselves began teaching women how to change their husbands. Making Marriage Work, Ladies' Home Journal's long-running advice column, gradually gave way to a different genre. The relationship as a problem to be diagnosed and corrected, with the wife as both the primary patient and the primary therapist. The habits Helen practiced quietly disappeared from that conversation. None of them could be packaged. You cannot sell a woman the habit of changing her dress at 5 o'clock. You cannot charge a monthly fee for Perfume on a Friday night. A bottle of White Shoulders cost $3.50 and lasted 4 months. There was no margin in any of it. What replaced it had enormous margin. Couples therapy, weekend retreats, books on attachment styles, each built on a premise Helen would not have recognized, that attraction in marriage is primarily a communication problem. What she had solved was not communication, it was continuity. If you grew up watching a woman who did any of this, hit the like button. That woman is exactly who this channel was made for. 6 more secrets, and number 1 is not a habit. It is the reason every habit on this list worked, and the reason no self-help book has ever been able to say it plainly. Number 6, she had a life that had nothing to do with him. Helen had her garden. She had the Methodist Women's Auxiliary, whose members she had known since 1952. She had a subscription to McCall's and one to House Beautiful, and she read both cover to cover. She had opinions about things Robert had never thought about. Ladies' Home Journal advised in the early 1950s, be a little more gay and a little more interesting for him. The advice sounds patronizing now. The science behind it is not. Desire feeds on the unpredictable. A partner who has her own enthusiasms, her own friends, her own plans, is a source of ongoing novelty. A partner whose entire world is the marriage is not. Helen always had something happening. When Robert came home, he was arriving somewhere. He was not the entire address. Number 5, she danced with him in the living room on Friday night. The children put to bed. Perfume on the RCA Victor record player in the corner, the one they had bought on layaway from Sears in 1952 for $62 and paid off over 12 months. The coffee table moved against the wall. Helen and Robert were in the living room with the lamp on and the street quiet outside. It was not a performance. Nobody was watching. It was just the two of them moving together in the front room, because that was what you did on a Friday when you were married, and the week was over. Research by Scott Wiltermuth at Stanford, published in 2009, found that synchronized movement between two people produces measurable increases in feelings of connection, trust, and attraction. Two bodies moving in rhythm together, the brain reads that as evidence the people inside them belong together. She did not need the research. She knew the 10 minutes on Friday was the best part of her week. The foxtrot cost nothing. The record was $1.98 at the music counter in Woolworth's. The coffee table moved in 30 seconds. And for the length of the record, Robert and Helen were not a mortgage, a leaking roof, or a car that needed work. They were two people who had learned how to move together and had not forgotten. Number 4, she got out the good china on a Wednesday, for no reason. The Franciscan Desert Rose, 12 place settings in the rose and vine pattern, was bought on layaway at Lazarus Department Store in 1953 for $48. The rule was special occasions, but Helen occasionally decided that a Wednesday in March was a special occasion. She would set the table with the cloth napkins, the good glasses, and the gravy boat she used perhaps 4 times a year, then serve the same pot roast she would have served on everyday Melmac. Robert would sit down, look at the table, and say nothing for a moment. Then he would look at her. She would say, "I felt like it." B.F. Skinner established that variable rewards, unpredictable and arriving on no fixed schedule, produce stronger responses than rewards that arrive on time, every time. A Sunday dinner on the Good China is expected. A Wednesday dinner in March on the Desert Rose is not. She was not conducting an experiment. She was serving pot roast and deciding the occasion herself. Number 3, she touched him every day. Not in the bedroom, in the kitchen, in the hallway. A hand on his shoulder as she passed behind his chair at dinner. Her palm briefly on his forearm when he said something she found funny. Her fingers at his elbow when she handed him his coffee. Brief contacts, unremarkable, accumulated across 41 years. Tiffany Field at the Touch Research Institute at the University of Miami has spent 3 decades on this specific question. Her finding was clear. Casual touch, a hand on a shoulder for 2 seconds, lowers cortisol and raises oxytocin in both people. It does not need to be prolonged or significant. Helen knew none of this as research. She touched him the way her mother had touched her father, as a form of language that needed no occasion. The modern marriage can go entire days with no physical contact that is not either sexual or perfunctory. Helen made physical contact so routine that it was invisible. The invisibility was the mechanism, woven into the fabric of the ordinary day until it was simply what the day was made of. Number 2, she chose her battles. Most of them she did not fight. John Gottman, after 2 decades of research on thousands of couples, published a finding that surprised almost everyone outside of marriage. 69% of conflict in long-term relationships is what he called perpetual problems, disagreements rooted in genuine personality differences that will never be fully resolved. They are not resolved in year 30. The couples who stay together do not solve them. They develop a working relationship with them. Helen had married a man who left his shoes in the middle of the kitchen floor. He did it in 1952, and he did it in 1988. She moved them hundreds of times across 36 years without making it a conversation. Not because she had surrendered, because she had decided at some point in the early 1950s that the shoes were not the marriage. She saved the real conversations, the ones about money, about the children, about the things that mattered, for evenings when she was calm, he was fed, and the house was quiet. Ladies' Home Journal advised in 1954, if you must criticize, choose the right moment, never when he is tired or hungry. Her mother had said something similar while teaching her to make biscuits in 1948. Pick your moment, Helen. The biscuits were perfect. Every item on this list was something she did. A perfume, a clean dress, a Tuesday pie for no reason. Number 1 is not something she did. It is the reason every other item on this list worked, and the reason it cannot be packaged, sold, or scheduled into a weekly check-in. Number 1, she never tried to keep him attracted. She simply never stopped being worth attracting. Helen did not think of any of this as a strategy. The perfume was not a tactic. The door greeting was not a technique. The Good China on Wednesday was not a relationship intervention. They were the ordinary expression of a woman who had decided once, before the wedding, and then again every morning without naming the decision, to remain fully herself. Well-dressed, engaged, curious, warm, present in her own life. He was the beneficiary of that, and he knew it. That knowing, the daily evidence that she was a woman who had not dissolved entirely into the role of wife, was the source of the attraction that lasted 41 years. She had a self she had not abandoned, and a man who could see every day that it was still there. No program, no workshop, white shoulders on a vanity table for $3.50, a clean dress at 5 o'clock, the Good China on a Wednesday for no reason. None of it required a decision every morning. It required a woman who had not decided to stop. Tell me which of these the woman who raised you did. The perfume every day, the door greeting, the dancing on a Friday, And if there is one you are putting back into your own week, I want to know that too. Leave it in the comments. If this one found you at the right moment, subscribe and hit the bell. There is more where this came from. I'll see you in the next one.